It is officially autumn here in Australia, which means that I cannot put off repotting my favorite plants any longer. This Monstera has roots coming out the top and the bottom, and she's definitely outgrown this pot. Monsteras like to be root bound, so this wasn't urgent, which is why I've put it off all of summer and spring, but I can't any longer. My plan is to size this pot up 2 inches and use a different grow pole. I always keep my plants in the nursery pot, which is this black pot here, and then put those pots in the decorative pot. It is so much easier to repot when you've got a planter that is malleable, and they also have really great drainage and are super cheap. After giving this one a few presses on the side, this one slid out fairly easily. Once this plant was out of the pot, I could see that she'd split into 2 maiden plants instead of 1, and I spent some time deciding if I wanted to separate them or not. To separate, I would just cut one off and propagate that and leave the other one as it is. I'm not going to try and untangle these roots. I decided against separating them and then second-guessed myself and had another good look, but decided to keep it together. I'm using an aroid mix here, which is a chunky mix, which Monsteras prefer. Don't forget to shake your pots whenever you are repotting or adding new soil to make sure that it gets into all the crevices. I always put a saucer in the bottom of my pots as well, so that no water is leaking onto my floor if I water them. Next up, I pushed a pole into the soil as well, so that this Monstera has something to climb up. Having a Monstera climb will stop it from splaying out and help it to grow tall instead. Now she's all done, I just had to make sure I liked the pot combo together, and I do. Then it was time for a quick cleanup and to admire the plant in her new pot. After putting this off all summer, it actually didn't take long, and I'm really happy with how it looks. I rescued this poor Fiddle fig exactly a month ago, and wait until you see all the new growth. After being left in a corner somewhere to dry out, she's now thriving and one of my favorite fiddles. If you've missed my previous videos, I rescued this plant from Bunnings for $10. I wasn't on the lookout for another plant, but I knew that she'd probably end up in the bin if I didn't rescue her, and knew that I could save her. One of my most frequent requests is how to bring Fiddle back to life, so let's go through it together. This was to give her a really good soak to decrease the stress she was going through, and also try and wash off any pests that may have been lurking. Next up was damage control, which looked like removing any of these dodgy leaves. One of the main reasons I do this is so the plant can focus on producing new leaves, and it's not trying to save these existing ones. As well as cutting them off, I gave every leaf a good tug just to make sure that they were sturdy and going to stay on the plant. Next up was pest control, and I sprayed this plant down with an insecticide. As well as dealing with any bugs that may have been hiding, it's also a fantastic leaf shine. This is the day after I rescued her, if you can believe it, and she already looks so much better. So now it is time for a repot. I honestly don't know what medium she was planted in, but it was not doing any favor for the roots, and it was holding a lot of moisture and taking up a lot of space. Fiddle leaves are one of those plants that like to dry out completely in between watering, so I'm swapping out whatever the heck this is for a well-draining chunky mix. I water my Fiddle leaf figs every 2 weeks in summer, and even less in winter. You do not want to overwater them because they are prone to root rot. Once she was repotted, I gave her another water, and she was looking so much better. Within a week, she was already pushing out new leaves. This was due to removing those old ones, and I'd also given her a liquid NPK fertilizer. She was thriving, and then one night I woke up to an almighty crash, and my senior dog had knocked her over in the night. Now, I can't really blame him because it is a very top-heavy plant, so she was easy to topple. Because of this, I've decided to actually size her up into a bigger pot. And this is her today. She's pushed out so many new leaves, and not only pushed out leaves, but they are big and bright and beautiful. This is all just within a few weeks, so if you've got fiddles that are struggling, this is your sign to cut them right back and watch them thrive. There is new growth on the top and bottom, and even on those leggy stems. There's a few shots of the same leaves, just a few weeks apart. Let me know if you've got any more questions about how to save a fiddle leaf fig. As you can see, it is definitely possible. This Pilea has outgrown her pot, so let's give her an upgrade. First up, I'm going to gently remove her from her home and remove this old soil. The new pot I've got doesn't have drainage holes, so I'm going to put her in a nursery pot first. A little hack is to put a mesh round in the bottom so your soil doesn't fall straight out the bottom. I'm adding some fresh soil and giving her a good water, making sure I don't get the leaves wet. And then she's going into a fancy new black and gold planter and back on my plant shelf. Let this be your inspo to check on your plants and repot as well. Let's repot my Philodendron Brazil. On the weekend, I had a slight incident which reminded me why plants need to be in nursery pots and not decorative pots without drainage holes. I've had this plant for a while, and although she looks great, it was definitely time for a new pot and some fresh soil. I removed the cocoa coir pole to make the process easier, and I gently pulled her out of her pot. Luckily, there was no root rot, even though she'd been swimming for a while, but I did find that she had a death plug. Death plugs are used to help seedlings become established, but they can hinder your plant's growth over time if they don't disintegrate properly, which is common. Once she was free from her mesh vines and in a nursery pot and a cute decorative pot, I decided I was actually going to switch her out with my tetrasperma. I've had the mini Monstera there for years now, so this pop of colour is a nice change. Once she was planted and secured, I remembered I had some cuttings propagating, so I grabbed those too and added them to the pot for a fuller plant. Let me know what you think. I have had this snake plant since 2020 and never repotted her, so let's do it together. Snake plants generally have a shallow root system, but due to the size and age of the snake plant, I knew this would be deeper. You can see she's a little root bound but looks healthy. The easiest way to propagate a snake plant is by division. This means breaking apart the leaves, roots and rhizomes together at the base. This is so much faster than trying to root a cutting. I'm going to combine two snake plants together to make a very full plant. The bigger of the two is staying intact, and the smaller I'm going to break apart and put around the outside. You can see the smaller of the two has a much shallower root system. The rhizomes were very easy and satisfying to break apart. If you wanted to propagate these, you could put them all in their own little pots, but I'm loving this big beefy gal. Now I know this plant isn't a cactus, but I am using a cactus soil mix and then giving her a good drink of water and popping in a bigger decorative pot. You can't tell me she doesn't look incredible. I love combining plants together to make a bigger one. I know I'm rogue for repotting on carpet, so here is a little behind the scenes of the quick cleanup as well. Merging plants together in one pot, yay or nay? I love merging plants together because it's a great way to get a fuller looking plant faster. Today I'm going to combine 3 rubber plants. These are all in the Ficus family, and I've got 2 Ficus burgundy and 1 Ficus tenica that I'm putting together in this yellow pot. These live outside, so some of the leaves are a little bit nibbled on, but I think they look beautiful. I'm really happy with how this turned out. You can grab this pot from Bunnings in this color or in the black, and this is 47 centimeters. Let's pot up this gorgeous watermelon peperomia. I've been looking for a medium-sized peperomia for a while and couldn't find one anywhere, so I've opted for buying 2 small ones, and I'm going to combine them in the one planter. This is such a great hack if you're looking to make a bigger plant. First up, I'm removing them from their nursery pots, and I'm also going to remove the bulk of this soil. Often the soil that comes with plants from big box stores isn't the best quality. You can see it's super crumbly, and I find that the soil does not hold water well. As always, I'm going to add some soil to the bottom of the pot, add in my plants, and then fill in the gaps anywhere around them. This ceramic pot does have drainage holes, so I don't need to worry about putting them in a nursery pot first. You always want to make sure that your pots have drainage holes so that you don't get root rot. I know it's tempting to buy planters that don't have holes, and if you do this, just make sure you keep it in the nursery pot so you can water it efficiently. Once she's all repotted and had a good slap, I'm going to give her a really good drink of water. I'm adding a little NPK boost to the water here, and I'm also using warm water. You don't want to shock your plant, especially when it's just been repotted. One tip for peperomias is do not get their leaves wet. They don't like it. They will go brown, mushy, and die off. I'm letting the water drain out the bottom here and then putting it on my shelf. I'm obsessed, and you can't tell that it's 2 plants that I've merged together. Let's give this mother of a spider plant the pot she deserves. This big gal has given me so many spiderettes over the years that she is in fact the mother to all of my other spider plants. Due to her size, I had kept her in this nursery pot, but it's time to give her a new outdoor pot. I love the roots in spider plants. They are so chunky. This is a super sturdy plant, so repotting is a breeze. I'm giving her some fresh soil and a good soak. I live in Australia, and I keep this plant outside year round. They can handle the sun and the colder weather, and so can this pot. It is UV and frost resistant, making this duo the perfect pair. Let's transfer my Euphorbia trigona from a nursery pot to ceramic. I know I'm always telling you to use nursery pots for your houseplants, but this does not apply to cacti. This is because nursery pots help to retain moisture in soil. Whilst this is great for a lot of plants, it is not great for desert plants. I knew I was going to repot this African milk tree, so have not watered in quite some time. Having dry soil makes the repot a little bit cleaner. Please use thick gloves when you are repotting a cactus. I have tried the towel hack and it did not end well. I'm planting the cacti back into the same pot. I'm adding a small mesh round down the bottom to catch any excess soil. You can buy cactus soil or make your own. Try to mimic their natural environment, which is an arid, sandy place. I'm using unglazed ceramic here, which means the pot will absorb some of the water. This happens with terracotta as well, and is a really good idea for plants that like to be drier. The pot will retain some of the water and release it into the soil as it dries. As the material is porous, both water and air can get through it. These are both so important for this plant. As always, this planter of course has a drainage hole, so let's go bottom water my Euphorbia trigona. I water my cacti monthly in summer and less in the cooler seasons. These plants don't need a lot of fertilizer, and 2 to 3 times a year is fine. As for placement, this is definitely not a bathroom plant. They like a bright, sunny spot with low humidity. The African milk tree does not like a drafty environment either. Try to keep her in a sunny spot away from an air conditioner. This doesn't apply to pots with little feet, but if you're using unglazed ceramic or terracotta, I suggest popping something underneath it if you're going to put the plant on wood. As these planters hold moisture, you can have some mold growing under your planter when you move it. Grab some stone or marble coasters, or even a little glass bowl will work. Let's go through some care requirements for the Christmas cactus while I repot mine. The Schlumbergera or Christmas cactus is not actually a cactus at all, it is a succulent. This flowering beauty can produce red, pink or white flowers and hails from the forests of Brazil. Being so, it has higher water and humidity requirements compared to other succulents. I water mine every 2 to 3 weeks depending on the season. Like most plants, the Christmas cactus will go dormant in the cooler months, but this is also when it produces flowers. This plant will thrive with humidity from 50 to 70% and can also benefit from misting. When it comes to soil, I recommend combining a succulent soil with a regular indoor houseplant soil. This ensures some dryness in between waterings, but also ensures that excess water can drain away. As always, you must use a planter or decorative pot with a hole, or you can use a nursery pot and put this inside your decorative planter. I've been slowly transferring all my succulent and cacti to terracotta pots. I find they don't require the added moisture that a nursery pot provides. Terracotta pots are an excellent choice for succulents and cacti. The porous nature of the pot encourages better air circulation and moisture evaporation. I always add a little mesh around to the base of my pots to ensure that soil isn't falling through. The Christmas cactus enjoys a fairly bright spot. Place it somewhere that gets bright, indirect, and direct light throughout the day. If your plant isn't blooming, it can be a sign that it needs more sunlight. Be careful putting it in direct, harsh afternoon sun though, because you may scorch the leaves. This plant isn't a heavy feeder, and fertilizing every 4 to 6 weeks in the growing season is fine. As with most succulents, this plant is very easy to propagate. You can see she propagated herself with this small little leaf that had rooted. To intentionally propagate, you want to take a section with 2 to 3 segments. Let the cutting dry overnight and then transfer to soil. As for common problems, if you've got yellowing leaves or mushy stems, you may be overwatering. If your plant looks wilted or shriveled, then you may be underwatering. A leaf drop and brown tips is a sign of lack of humidity. If you spot some sticky residue on your leaves, you may have a pest such as aphids or mealybugs. I like to bottom water this plant so she is fully saturated but doesn't have wet topsoil. If you're using terracotta or unglazed ceramics, try not to put the pot directly onto wood. As the pot does retain moisture, it can promote mold growth. Putting a marble coaster or glazed ceramic or glass underneath is a great option. Let me know if you have any other questions about this pretty plant. Let's chat about all things pot plant, focusing on the importance of using pots with drainage holes and why nursery planters are your best friend. I plant all of my plants into nursery pots. I then slide these into my decorative pots. If the decorative pot has holes as well, I use a saucer. If not, I just put it straight in the decorative pot. This is for all sized plants, large and small. There's a few reasons why I do this and why I recommend you do as well. First up is drainage. It is so important that your plants can drain excess water properly. This is to ensure they don't get issues like root rot, and also so oxygen can get to the roots as well. Overwatering is the #1 plant killer, and this helps to stop that. Another great reason to use nursery pots is they are super malleable. This means when it comes to repotting a plant, it's easy to get them out. The nursery pots and saucers are also fairly affordable, so you can size up your plant's pot without changing the decorative pot. Some pots like unglazed ceramic and terracotta also absorb water from your plant. As well as draining water out, you can also let it in when you're bottom watering your plant.